All right, let's start from here. Shalom, shalom. This is the Bible study. J.A. Madison. We're doing a midweek Bible study, kind of a late week Bible study, Thursday, Yom Kamishi, uh, June the 4th, they call it, right? 2026 is the year they call it, right? So let's dive in. Shabuoth is what we're going to talk about. This is what we talked about briefly on Shabbat, but we're going to go over a little bit more this today and tonight. That's my hope, rather. And then we will, whatever we don't cover, like I'm planning to continue on Shabbat, but we might not have that much to cover. So we kind of went through parts of it already, and I'll kind of skim through those a little bit more, and then we'll go and stop whenever the Creator leads me. I don't want to hold you too long. I actually do want you to get some rest tonight. So probably a little bit over an hour, and then we'll stop. So Shabuoth, Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, right? We're going to review some parallels between Shabuoth during the ancient times and also during the times that we see where Messiah ascended and the Ruach HaKodesh came down upon mankind. So let us grow in our understanding, right? So we talked about the 50 days of empowerment. We talked about counting the Omer. There was a question that came up before about the barley and the wheat, right? Barley being, I've heard it described as, okay, like an immature grain, or, what I'm saying? But then the transformation occurs and then the wheat harvest comes. And so I understand where people may have been trying to come from when they talk about the barley transform into the wheat. Technically, they're two different grains. Barley does not become wheat, but if you're using it in a symbolic type of way, saying the people, when they first come into the land, they're immature. This is the first crop that they bring up, right? Then they go through this changing, this transformation, this maturation process after they receive or once they are getting themselves ready for the covenant, and they enter into this covenant, they become, wheat at the Feast of Shabuoth. So I get the symbolism that could be trying to be made there. You know, if that helps you to understand it, then, as long as it's not violating Torah or the principles that we see in Torah, then you can use that, to help you in your understanding. What I always try to do is get my understanding from the Most High. He would use people sometimes, and sometimes the Most High will give me revelation in the way He chooses to give me revelation. He'll give me insight or change my perspective or open my eyes to something and help me to see it more clearly. So, so we talked about the feasts and activities that are connected with Shabuoth. That's the Passover and unleavened bread. That's the first feast of the year. And then you have first fruits, which is at the end of unleavened bread. Then you have this period where they call counting the Omer, right? We talked about that we talked about that before, how that's kind of seems to be a more of a traditional thing. But again, like I said, I'm not saying all traditions are bad either. So that's why you have to kind of mind the tradition and then allow the Creator to give you the understanding of the tradition, the correct understanding, if it's good or if it's error somewhere, right? But yeah, basically you're preparing yourself for a meeting with the Creator, because we're going into this feast and we're not supposed to come before Him empty-handed as men, right? So we went over that before, and we talked about the barley harvest and the wheat, right? Barley was first, wheat comes later. Wheat is more mature, more valued of a grain, from my understanding, than barley. I think I heard somebody say that. Well, I don't want to get into that. Actually, let me no tangent. So we did talk about some things in that regard about the barley and the wheat harvest, two different harvests, but the wheat is the more valued harvest, from my understanding, and also it was a more mature grain, from my understanding. So you can see the symbolism people might use to liken that to people. We looked at this before, the 3 times in a year. The men, I think everybody understands why the men are being called. And that's not to say that the women are insignificant. It's just, like I said, this is the order of the Creator. And so the Creator says He wants to see the men. The men represent the home. They are the seed. They carry the seed. You carry the seed as a man. You carry the seed, your seed line. You carry your father's seed line. So when you have sons, the seed line will continue, and your sons will carry your seed line and your father's seed line. right? So it's the same seed line. You carry that, you trace that seed line. It's come from all the way back to the first giver of the seed, right? So you see where you come from. And it's good if you can. Ladies, it's good if you can do that too. If you can trace your paternal lineages back on your mom's and your father's side, that's good. And it doesn't mean the women are insignificant. Please understand this. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the actual seed line. Remember, you can take an apple seed and you can grow that thing in Florida. And you can also grow that thing in Wisconsin. And you can grow that thing in Alaska. Now they might look different because the soil content and the soil makeup and the nutrient content in the soil, but the seed is still an apple tree. So that's, we talked about this before. You are what your father is, technically. And you are your father, to put it like this too. Every human being, if we're going to use that term, is the result of a man and a woman coming together. Aside from the first humans that were created by the Father, right? Everyone that comes beyond them, below them, is the result of two people becoming one. A man and a woman became one. A man and a woman became one. They produced a son or they produced a daughter, right? So you carry you have genetic lineage or inheritance from your mother and your father. So it's not just one-sided. What I'm talking about is tracing the seed line back, because the seed is the structure or the pillar or the backbone from what you are built from your makeup. If maybe that's a better way to say it. It's the backbone. It's the structure. It's the template for your makeup. You are your father's seed. You were planted in the soil of your mother, and then your father and your mother became one to create you. Yet the backbone or the template or the makeup of who you are, from uh, a seed standpoint, is your father. So hopefully that makes sense. We also found out that the Shabuoth is known as what is also a Shabuoth known as? What's some other names for Shabuoth?
Pentecost.
Pentecost is one. What else we got? Shabuoth. What does that word mean? Shabua. What does that word mean? Shabuoth is plural. Shabua is singular. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 1 week, right? There you go. Feast of Weeks. Right. So, yeah, so we talked about that, and these are one of the 3 times, right, that the men appear. We also talked about, did we talk about this part? Yes, we did. We talked about this. This was how you look at first fruits, and first fruits is when they wave the sheaf. After that, they would count 50 days from that day to get to the 7 completed Sabbaths, and after that you got Shavuot, Feast of Weeks. Thus, the 7 completed Sabbaths, 1 completed Sabbath is a week. 7 of those is 7 weeks, obviously, plus 1 day would give you 50. Pentecost, they say in the Greek. Shavuot, they say in the Hebrew. We also looked at where Messiah is our first fruits, right? It says he has been raised from the dead and has become the first fruits of those having fallen asleep. If you understand the principle of first fruit, this is where I like to get into more the meat of things, right? First fruits is a principle, just like it sounds. If you plant a crop, and you get a harvest, you're going to have something from the harvest that you can go and dedicate as the first fruits that you take from that harvest, or that comes up in that harvest. The first fruits, you give it unto the Creator, right? And that sets the rest of the harvest apart. Now think about this. When they did this too, you can look at it as like them thanking the Father for the crop. They're also looking for the Father to help them with protecting the crop from disease or famine or fire. They're looking for the Father to make the crop abundant. So they're dedicating this from a place of earnesty, right? You want to do it from a place of earnesty, and then Abba will, prosper the rest of that crop. It's going to be set apart. Because fire was a very real threat. Think about that. What if a person had an enemy, and this person had many fields, many crops, and that person was jealous or envious, right? And nobody was out there guarding his crops. They could set fire to his crops. He would lose his enterprise, a lot of his enterprise, if his crop went down by fire. So you can see so much attached to this principle of first fruits. When you dedicate it to the Father, now you have given the best of that crop to him, the first of that crop to him, and he will protect the rest of that crop. You know, don't you believe he's going to deal with your enemies? Absolutely, he's going to deal with your enemies, right? So you see this principle of first fruits, and look what it says. For since death is through a man, the resurrection of the dead is also through a man. For as all die in Adam, or Adam, so also all shall be made alive in Hamashiach, and each in his own order. Messiah, the first fruits, then those who are of Messiah at his coming. The Messiah, the first fruits. First fruits sets the rest of the crop apart. Remember, now the rest of the crop, Israel, is holy, set apart. Think about it. There's a lot of symbolism in it when you look at these feasts. So I told you, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruit, Shabuoth, they all have a connection. They all have a connection, right? You see harvest, a harvest connection. The Feast of Weeks, we read this. We went over the days as well, and we saw that they were supposed to bring 2 loaves of bread as a wave offering. And it's just like it sounds. You literally wave the baked bread before the Creator, and you can pray before. You can pray before you do it. You can praise Him while you're doing it as well. All praise to the Most High. This verse, I didn't read this verse last time. Isaiah 11 and 12. So if you read this Isaiah 11 is talking about Hamashiach, the Messiah. So if I go here to this Isaiah 11, let me show you something. In verse 12, because first off it tells you in the first verse, a rod shall come forth from the stump of Jesse, or the stump of Yeshai, Jesse, and the sprout from his root shall be fruitful. So this is talking about the messianic line, right? And you see all these spirits that are going to rest upon him, right? It's really saying the spirit of Yahuwah shall rest upon him, in the spirit of wisdom and understanding. You'll see these other characteristics that this person is going to have. And me personally, I perceive this is talking about Hamashiach, and some may liken this to speaking about David, but David also, we know that Hamashiach descends he comes from the line of David as well. So he's actually called son of David and son of Abraham in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. So, and it tells you in verse 12 that verse 12, he shall raise a banner for the nations and gather the outcasts of Israel, and assemble the dispersed of Yahudah from the 4 corners of the earth. Now notice this 4 corners verse. And then look at verse 11 before that. It shall be in that day that Yahuwah sets his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Assyria, Mizraim, Pathros, Cush, Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he, the Most High, shall raise a banner for the nations. A banner for the nations. Now, if we look at this in another translation, let's look at the ESV and go to verse 12. Then you'll see verse 12 says, he shall gather the dispersed of Judah. Hold on, let me go up. There we go. He will raise a signal for the nations, right? A signal for the nations, right? And if you look at the KJV, I think it's going to say it even in an even different way. And if we look down here, you'll see it says, verse 12, he should an ensign for the nations, right? So just looking at this verse, and then you slide on over here. Slide on over the blue letter. And let's go to 11 and 12. And if we get the word for nations right there. And sure enough, it says, go Goyim. La Goyim. Okay, I was just making sure. I just wanted to see where the surety right there. All right, now, so let's stop. Let's go back over here now to the presentation, and we'll pick up with some of the new material. And So the loaves of bread, if you've never done it before, go ahead and practice this week. Well, you don't have, well, you got to practice tomorrow. If you're gonna bake it, you can do a quick rise if you need to, but more you want to get familiar with how to bake bread because once you get it, you're gonna like it. But I saw Jocelyn, you said you were intimidated with baking bread. Don't be, just jump in there. Trust me, you can be like, man, I should have been doing this instead of going to the store. All right, let's keep going. By the way, hopefully some of y'all, do y'all read some of these names of some of these products? Do y'all not buying this stuff, are y'all? Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Anybody ever seen that drink? What is it called? Liquid Death?
Right. I asked my Islamic friend that has a store, why are you selling this?
Man, man, who's buying that? Come on, man. It say Liquid Death on the. How could you with a solid conscience drink that? Seriously. And then what? Dave's Killer Bread. It's organic bread. Killer meaning they just saying, oh, it's really good, but nah, man, change the word, man. I'm not buying that. Killer bread. I think I bought it a long time ago. I bought it before, but I'm like, nah, I'm good. Give me some better language on that, sir. Just say bread, organic bread. Wow, there it is. No adjectives, just organic bread. Thank you. But you do have to be careful, though. Be careful. That's why I said, hopefully y'all not buying this stuff. All right, let's keep going. Uh, Check this out. We talked about this briefly, but I'm gonna tell you something about this. When you reap your harvest in your field, you have forgotten the sheaf in the field. Don't go back to get it. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, so that Yahuwah, your Elohim, might bless you in all the work of your hands. Now, this is also a principle. Allah has always made a way for the stranger. And so let's read these verses around this verse, and then I'm gonna show you some in the Book of Jubilees after this. Let's go to Leviticus Vaikra, and let's go to, what is that? Uh, 19. Was I in 19? No, I was in 24. Deuteronomy, excuse me. Wrong chapter. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 24. And I'll show you something there. All right. So let's hop on down to Deuteronomy 24, starting at verse 19, right here. All right. Now, pay attention to this. When you reap your harvest in the field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, do not go back to get it. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, so that Yahuwah, your Elohim, might bless you in all the work of your hands. When you reach your olive trees, do not examine the branch behind you. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, do not glean behind you. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mizraim. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this work. So you see this way made for the stranger all the time. Look at verse 18. You shall remember that you were a slave in Mizraim, and that Yahuwah, your Elohim, ransomed you from there. Therefore, I'm commanding you to do this work. So you see this, right? Don't twist the right ruling of a stranger with a father's sword, nor take the garment of a widow, right? So you have to you see the heart of the Father when you read the text and you understand these higher principles, right? Where he's telling us to be a certain way. We're representatives of him. So wanted to make sure I went over that. Um, Now I will say this because I think there's been a lot of contention in Israel period about when it comes to the stranger, and I do honestly I understand it because obviously you're dealing with a people that have been socially, economically, and in various ways oppressed or lived in an oppressive condition or system that they believe is oppressing them, excuse me, that is oppressing them, and also the system was not built by them. It was not necessarily built to benefit them. So people sometimes readily identify uh, others that benefit from the system but may not actually have anything to do with constructing the system, but they benefit from the system, thus they can deem them as someone who is not an enemy or anti them. And sometimes skin color is a way to readily recognize that, right? So then when you see somebody with a different skin color and they say, oh, that person is in this category automatically because they got a different skin color. It's obviously not based on skin color because if you look at in the Bible, so many enemies of Israel had the same color skin that Israel did. So it's not about skin color. I think because of the difference or what we see now, where there's a readily identifiable quote unquote oppressor, if you want to use that term, they readily identify them by their skin color, and they also have a recent history where these people that were of a certain skin color were above them in the societal uh, makeup, right? Or in the social cultural, or really in the societal construct. So, but understand this though, Israel was never meant to be under anyone. They've always been pulled, set apart for the Father. Deuteronomy 32 will tell you that. He says that when he separated all the nations, he kept Israel for himself. And so Israel has a special privilege and a special position because they've been chosen and selected by the Creator. It is not a boastful thing. It's really a responsibility. So he has selected Israel, and Israel is supposed to be this light to the rest of the world. And he helps them be that light. And so now, no one is ever supposed to be over Israel, period. So when you understand these principles, and now you see that Israel, when Israel comes together, and Israel is functioning as a nation, because right now we're not functioning as a nation, and we're functioning in communities, right? We're functioning as we're the Father intended for us. Then you will see a structure or an order. And in that order, there is never anyone from any other nation, regardless of their skin color. They are never set above Israel in any position in regard to leadership. Never. And when you see an example in Leviticus 25, when I went over that before, it tells you if in it, you can say a Gentile, someone who's not from your nation, he is living with you all. He's submitted to the Father. He's keeping the same covenant that was made with Israel. He can become rich. So this means he has enterprise. If you read that example and really meditate on the example, this person is operating in a type of freedom within the society, right? Where he has become rich in the society. It actually there's a law that tells you that he can. It doesn't say he can't be rich or he can't prosper. It doesn't say that at all. It talks about how if an Israelite works for him, then there is a time where he is redeemable under that contract, or say nobody can redeem him at the end of those 7 years or that 6 year contract. He's got to let him go anyway because he is an Israelite and no one's supposed to be over Israel. So only Israel. And so, but that's just understanding some of the deeper principles when it comes to Torah. They are things you must meditate on. It's not a biased thing. The way I look at it is, and I was talking to somebody recently, and they were talking about bias. I don't describe the most. Me personally, I don't want to describe the Most High as biased. Everything He does is righteous. Everything. So I can't call it bias. It carries a negative connotation with it. I know people might say, well, some people might say it's a good bias, it's a bad bias, or it's a negative and a positive bias. I'm like, I don't even want to use that term. Whatever the Most High do is good. Period. All of it, and all the time, even if we don't understand it. So I can't call it bias. So that's why I'm like, I ain't going to use that term. So He has put Israel in this position, and we know that He's done it. If He's done it, obviously it is good. And now we have to understand the principles because He defines what is good, and we operate according to those principles. And you see, if you read the text, He's always made a way for the stranger. Always. Even when they passed through some of them nations that didn't want to let them pass, remember what they did sometime before? They would go before and say, hey, look, we just trying to come through. We don't even want to drink the water yet. We're not even going to mess with y'all or nothing, we just passing through. And there was one king that was like, nah, they didn't want them to come through or something like that. Okay, they just made themselves enemies, right? They became enemies of Israel, thus they became enemies of the Most High. And so you understand, right? But then if the people come in and they say, "Look, we're not even gonna bother you. We're just trying to pass through and go this route." You understand what I mean? What's the harm in that? But you can tell that people were afraid. This was a massive nation with a mighty Elohim, with the Elohim, right? The true Elohim, the living Elohim, right? So they were afraid, and so the people didn't want to. There was a group that didn't want to let them pass. I'm not looking directly at my notes. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head right now. All right, let's keep going. But always been a way made for the stranger. Um, Now, with this part, did we cover this? Now, this part we didn't cover. Now, this in new material. So, when you look at Exodus 23, it also mentions the three feasts. So, it says 3 times in the year you are to celebrate a festival to me. Guard the festival of Mazot. 7 days you eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you at the time of the new appointed the new moon of Abib. In it you came out of Mizraim, and do not appear before me empty-handed. And the festival of the harvest, the first fruits of your labors which you have sown in the field, and the festival of the ingathering, right? So that's Shabuoth and Sukkot. So festival of the harvest is also known as Shabuoth. And festival of the ingathering is the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times in the year your males are to appear before the sovereign Yahuwah. Now, the word for first fruits is the word bikur, bikurim, or first fruits, right? Bikur is relating to first fruit. First fruit. It's the first fruits of the crop. Now look at the root of the word bikur. Bakar. Bakar. Look at what that word means. First born. First child. Firstling. The firstborn. Is anybody seeing the symbolism here when Messiah is referred to as our first fruits? Remember, we just read that. Is everybody following me so far? Because the
Okay.
first fruits is the firstborn of that crop. All right, good. Israel is a crop. Messiah is referred to as our first fruits. When you wave the first fruits offering, it sets the what? The rest of the crop is now set apart. All right, I think we rocking now. I think you following what I'm saying. Remember, Israel was considered the firstborn. Y'all remember that? Huh?
Okay.
No, we got some Bible readers on here now. I hope everybody's a Bible reader. Exodus chapter 4, verse 22. Remember what was told to Pharaoh, right? What did it say, verse 22? It says, "You shall say to Pharaoh, thus said Yahuwah, Israel is my son, my firstborn." There it is. Boom, right there in your Bible, right? Look at what it says in verse 23. "So I say to you, let my son go to serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, see, I am killing your son, your firstborn." Mm. I said this before. If you say it in a certain way, sometimes it pop differently. The Most High killed for you, Israel. That's a Selah moment. Anybody ever thought about it like that? Mm.
Absolutely.
It's very deep. It's very deep. He takes the covenant very seriously.
He did it in Mitzrayim.
And right, that's my point. He killed for you. So he killed for Israel. So the covenant is a very serious thing uh, to our Heavenly Father. Now let's keep going and let's go over to the parable. Now we've looked at this parable before, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm switching gears a little bit because you remember barley and wheat are symbolic of people. In the Bible, we see people being represented as wheat and tares, right? Remember this parable. And we looked at how similar they are. Look how much they look alike, right? And you really can't tell until they start producing them berries, them wheat berries, and them and whatever berry they're gonna produce. Then you start to see, oh, okay, no, that's wheat right there, and that is not wheat, right? And you got some characteristics of wheat, right? It bows down when it's right. It bends itself. It bows itself, right, as unto the Creator. And its seeds look, they're like pure. They're like a brighter color, from my understanding. But the tear is different. It stands straight up. It remains erect, prideful, right? Don't bow. Doesn't bow and remains erect. And it also has like a darker colored seed, from my understanding. I've seen it. My note says dark seeds right there. And it's also poisonous too, by the way. If eaten too much, it could be detrimental. So um, they call it a darnel, actually. And if you look up the etymology, I think of the word darnel, man, it was something I had looked at a while ago. Yeah, so darnel can be, oh, the French word for darnel is ivrei or something like that, from a Latin word, ebriacus, which means intoxicated. So that word darnel means intoxicated. It literally means, it goes to an etymology. It means, uh, I think it means something like intoxicated. You can look this up. I got some notes I'm looking at here right now. But they call it ivrier in French because which expresses the drunken nausea from eating the infected plant, which can be fatal. If you eat the infected version of darnel, from my understanding, it says it can be fatal. Um, because the darnel can be infected by a certain type of fungus, they say, and they list out that fungus. And so, yeah, it's also known as false wheat or fake wheat. Yeah. Oh man, this has got so much symbolism in it right here. Because then you could say, yeah, this my one of my elders brought this out, I think, to me when I was talking about this before. You can look at this parable in a whole different way. You have, and I don't bash Christians, right? I'm gonna talk about the religious construct of Christianity. So you have Christianity that teaches against keeping the law. Now they want, some of them don't blatantly, some strands of Christianity don't blatantly say that you don't have to follow God's laws, right? It's packaged in theology and semantics and wording. It's packaged differently to where they'll make a believer ascertain from their words or from their teaching that the Old Testament is irrelevant. It is now the new covenant or the New Testament that we follow, and and they censor everything on JC, right? So it comes down to wordplay, semantics, but so they're teaching these things, certain things that are not biblical. Doesn't mean that everything that's being taught in Christianity isn't biblical. But but you have one group that doesn't keep the law. They don't obey. They don't keep the feast. They celebrate pagan feasts or substitutes, and they don't observe the Father's laws. Right. Then you have another group that does obey the feast. They follow the Messiah's teachings, which are the same as the Father's teachings, and they observe the feasts that the Father's and the appointments that the Father has set. So you have two groups that are based on the same book, but one of them is really trying to follow the book or living by the book, and you got another group that is living a version of theology that is loosely based on parts of the book. So it's interesting when you see that term that they call a darnel a false wheat. They call it fake wheat. So one might say a fake believer, if you understand what I mean, versus a true believer. Now, I'm not talking about individuals in Christianity. I'm talking about the religious construct, the template from which Christianity is built. Christianity is a Roman construct. The Bible doesn't teach religion. Well, the faith of the Hebrews does not teach religion. The Bible is a book that's composed. But the faith of the Hebrews does not teach religion. It teaches relationship and covenant with the Creator, right? So let's keep going. Because we're familiar with this parable. I think everybody's familiar with this parable. We've gone over it many times. And remember, Messiah was talking about how he gave him the parable. Somebody sold, some tares in his field, and they were like, an enemy did this. I mean, he said an enemy did this. And actually, I'll go to it, and then we'll also skip over to Matthew 21. Excuse me, Luke 21, which is my next. I think it's on one of my next slides. So let's go to Matthew 13. That's all the way down to verse 26. He says, 24, and another parable he put before them, saying, the rain of the heavens has become like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed darnel among the wheat and went away. When the blade sprouted up, that's when the fruit appears and bore fruit, then the darnel also appeared. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? From where then does it have the darnel? And he said to them, a man, an enemy, did this. And the servant said to him, do you wish then that we go and gather them up? But he said, no. That's why you gather up the darnel, you also uproot the wheat with them. They both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest, I shall say to the reapers, first gather the darnel, bind them in bundles, and to burn them, but gather the wheat into my granary. And you slide down here, and he gives them the answer. Then, having sent the crowds away, Yahusha went into the house, and his taught which came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the darnel and of the field. And the answering said to them, he who is sowing the good seed is the son of Adam. And the field is the world, and the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. But the darnel are the sons of the wicked. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. And the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the messengers. As the darnel, then, is gathered and burned in the fire, so it shall be at the end of this age. The son of Adam shall send out his angels, his messengers, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks, and those doing what? Lawlessness, and shall throw them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous shall shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Notice that the kingdom is where? Here. And those gathered out of it are those that are wicked. Not those remaining in it, but those gathering out of it are those that are wicked. He says he's going to take out all the stumbling blocks and those doing lawlessness. So let's slide over now to chapter 21 of Luke. Let's go here. I think that's what I got next. Let's see. Oh, I got someone to show you in Jubilees too. Here we go. Before we do that, check this out. So this is the book of Acts. I want to go into. It says Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, who is for Yahuwah? Come to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves to him. And he said to them, thus said Yahuwah, Elohim of Israel, each one put his sword on his side, passed over to and fro from the gate and gate to gate in the camp. And each one killed his brother, and each one his friend, and each one his relative. And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moshe, and about 3,000 men of the people fell on that day. Question: what is this referring to? What happened that Moses told the Levites to go and do this? What happened? Anybody remember? You're not too sleepy already, are you?
When Aaron built the calf, golden calf, and they were worshiping, and Moses came down from the mountain, and they were busy
Okay.
praising and worshiping him and everything. And so Yahuwah said, "You need to go down there because he was going to take them out." I'm thinking so. He came down and
Mm.
asked them, "All right, for all those that are on Yahuwah's side, come over here," and then all those that didn't move, those were the ones that got taken out.
Yeah. So when you look at the words where it says that they were playing when he came down the hill, there was. So if you look at them Hebrew words, they were doing. They was uh, one version of a passage. I think it translated, or they kind of noted that there was some orgy like
Yep.
behavior going on. So we're not just talking about regular. It was some bad stuff going on when he came down there, hit that mountain, and so there was a real separation that needed to occur. You got to remember the people had just come out of Egypt. They had a lot in them. They had been there for years, generations and generations and generations, right? Remember, 400 something years. So all they know is Babylon, Egypt, right? And now they come out, but Egypt's still in them. That's what their culture is. That's what they know, you know. And so now they dealing with some stuff in the wilderness, And Moses was gone for a long time, and they had made the decision. So here was a real separation occurring, and you see the zeal of the Levites. And it says 3,000 fell on that day. 3,000, y'all. This is something. Now, when you look at this passage in the book of Acts, this is the book of Acts, and I'll show you something in chapter 1 in the book of Acts. Now, when we look at the book of Acts, check this out. In the first part of this book, it says, the first account I made, O Theophilus, of all that Yahusha began both to do and to teach, until the day when he was taken up after giving instructions through the set apart Ruach to the emissaries whom he had chosen, to whom he also presented himself alive after his suffering by many infallible proofs, being seen by them for 40 days, speaking concerning the reign of Elohim. So for 40 days he was seen after his resurrection. That's what it's saying right here, right? And meeting with them, he commanded them not to leave Jerusalem, but wait for the promise of the Father, which you have heard from me. Because Yochanan truly immersed in water, but you shall be immersed in the set apart Ruach not many days from now. So when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Master, would you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? And he said to them, it is not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority. Now, why would they ask him that? They asked him that knowing prophecy, right? They wait. The Messiah is going to come, and the kingdom, Israel is going to be restored to their right place. And so they asked him this question with that type of a foreknowledge. They knew the Messiah was to come. And there were many in Israel. They knew about this. The Messiah was coming. And he said to them, it's not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the set apart Ruach has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judah and Samaria and to the end of the earth. Having said this, while they were looking on, he was taken up in a cloud, hidden from their sight. And as they were gazing into the heaven as he went up, see two men stood by them dressed in white, who also said, Men of Galilee, or men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up into the heaven? This same Yahusha, who was taken up from you into the heaven, shall come in the same way as you saw him go into the heaven. All praise to the Most High. When we slide over to chapter 2, now we see something, right? Look at this. The day of the festival of Shabuoth. When the day of the festival of Shabuoth had come, they were all with one mind in one place. Suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them divided tongues as a fire, and settled on each one of them. And they were all filled with the set apart Ruach, and began to speak with other tongues as the Ruach had gave them to speak. Now in Jerusalem there were dwelling Yahudim, dedicated men from every nation under the heaven. When this sound came to be, the crowd came together and were confused, because everyone heard them speak in his own language. They were all amazed and marveled, saying to each other, Look, are not all these who speak Galileans? And how do we hear each one in our own language in which we were born? That's a key verse right there. Parthians and Medes and Elamites and those dwelling in Aram, Naharim, both Judah and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, both Phrygia and Pamphylia, Mizraim and the parts of Libya around Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Yahudim and converts, Cretans and Arabs. We hear them speaking in our own tongues the great deeds of Elohim. And so when you see that, now you want to understand something, right? Because some people will say, well, let me finish this. Let me finish this part. Hold on. I did something with my screen. All right, here we go. So now when you see this, it says they were all amazed and were puzzled, saying to each other, what does this mean? And others mocking said, they've been filled with sweet wine. But Peter, carefully standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said to them, Men of Yahuda, and all those dwelling in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen closely to my words, for these men are not drunk, as you imagine, since it's only the third hour of the day. It's basically 9 o'clock in the morning. But this is what was spoken by the prophet Yoel. It shall be in the last days, says Elohim, that I shall pour my Ruach on all flesh. I shall pour out of my Ruach on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, And your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And also on my male servants and on my female servants I shall pour my ruach in those days, and they shall prophesy. And I shall show wonders in the heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire, and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and splendid day of Yahuwah. And it shall be that everyone who calls on the name of Yahuwah shall be blessed. All praise to the Most High. Now, the notable thing one of the things I want to talk about in regards to this is this. So, and you go show you some down in my notes. Now, the promise of the Father in chapter 1 is the Ruach HaKodesh, right? You see that, and in my notes I also see I have the book of Luke and the book of John cited as well. The Spirit. Quick question, I guess. See if my mic changed. Let me know if you can. Let me see if I'm back. All right. Microphone, am I back yet? Think I'm back. Quick mic check. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you, Moray.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. So the thing I wanted to highlight was that when it comes to speaking in tongues, right? So my current understanding, well, first let me say this. The Spirit is a gift from Elohim, and the fruit of the Spirit are many. Tongues is also one of those gifts. Now, tongues, from my understanding, can be an actual language. It just said that every man heard in his own language. And it said that the Ruach, if I'm not mistaken, in that chapter, it says the Ruach gave them, they uttered as the Ruach gave them the tongue. So in that regard, you can see that it was not the same tongue. Everybody was not speaking the same tongue. Everybody understand what I'm saying thus far? Because they were speaking with other tongues, meaning other languages. These men heard these languages. So everybody was not speaking the same language. They weren't speaking with the same tongue. Everybody follow me so far.
Okay.
Okay, so I also believe that it can be a language between a man and Elohim. This is from my current understanding, and this is based on something that I see in 1 Corinthians 14, verses 2 and 4. Now, I'm on, it is tongues or genuine tongues. Emphasis on the word genuine. Got to be authentic. Is that evidence that a person has the gift of the Spirit? Yes, absolutely. Is that the only evidence that a person has the gift of the Spirit? No, it's not. You see that also when you read Shaul's letters, and you'll see that everybody does not receive the gift of speaking in tongues. Although we do see people speaking in tongues when they receive the Ruach HaKodesh, we also know that there are other fruit of the Ruach HaKodesh. So when you read 1 Corinthians 12, I'll put some of this up here on the screen so you can see it. Uh, chapter 12, verse 29. 12, verse 29. Let me share my screen. You see that. I'm not aware of the recent teaching that was done on it. I'm just giving you my understanding. I haven't watched the recent teaching on tongues, but I'm going to show you something in 1 Corinthians. All right, so 1 Corinthians 14, right? He who is speaking in a tongue does not speak to men, but to Elohim. Wait a minute. It said, he who is speaking in a tongue does not speak to men, but to Elohim, for no one understands, but in the spirit he speaks secrets. All right, so he's not speaking to another person with this tongue. Who is he speaking to? Elohim. All right, now, when I read verse 4, it said, he who is speaking in a tongue builds up himself, but he who is prophesying builds up the assembly. Paul says, I wish you all spoke with tongues, but rather that you might prophesy, for he who is prophesying is greater than he who is speaking in tongues, unless he interprets, so that the assembly might receive upbuilding. So when you see this, obviously everybody does not speak in tongues, because that sometimes you might hear certain denominations, if you will, even in Hebrew Israelism, that would teach that you have to speak it. That's the only sign that you have the set apart ruach. but the actual text don't say that that's the only sign. So also, it's supposed to be done in order. Now, there's a difference between uh, you understand what I mean? There's a difference between genuine tongues and then somebody just making something up. That's something totally different. But there's a genuine tongues, as you can see in the text, that comes upon men and make them actually speak in another language altogether that they were not learned in. And it, like an actual language, like Korean or French, right, or Russian, they can speak in an actual language and not have ever been taught the language, right? Now, that's what you see kind of in Acts 2. The other form is what I feel like is a private language. It's a prayer language, and that's different. And so Paul gives an order. He says, if anyone speaks in a tongue, let there be two or at the most three, each in turn, and let one interpret. So he's talking about order, right? So it's not just random what we probably have seen in the church, right? Again, not knocking any particular individual, but what we might have seen in the religion of Christianity. It was, I don't know how many of y'all have ever seen it done in order in the Christian church. But if there is no interpreter, he says, let him be silent in an assembly and let him speak to himself and to who? Elohim. All right. So this, it gets, I'm not pulling up the Greek words here, but I'm just highlighting context first. I mean, for now, rather, I'm just highlighting context. But this is something you want to understand from a contextual standpoint and an order standpoint. If you read verse 28, it's telling you that this person is under control. Does anybody else understand what I'm saying when I say that? It's not saying this person has lost or has lost themselves or they are possessed, if you will. But it's talking about they are in control. What does he say? If there is no interpreter, Paul says what? Let him be silent. Meaning he can control what he is uh he can control himself in this instance. It's not uncontrollable, if you understand what I mean, right? Out of order or chaotic. It is done in order. So just a little blip on the speaking in tongues part. Um, again, I'm not aware of the broader teaching that was done on that recently, but um, wanted to share my understanding right there. Also, a quick note, by the way, you note when Paul received the Spirit, Acts 9. It says Hananiah went into the house. It's Acts 9. And laying his hands on him, he said, Brother Shaul, the master Yahusha, who appeared to you on the way as you came, has sent me, so that you might see again and be filled with the set apart Ruach. Remember, Paul went blind right after he had that. He was blind for what? Was it 3 days? And it says immediately when Hananiah went and put his hands on him, right? It says immediately there fell from his eyes as it were scales, and he received his sight. And rising up, he was immersed. Now we know that Paul spoke in tongues, as we see in his writings, but right there, it doesn't appear as though it was immediate as we see that it appears to be in other instances. For instance, when Peter was speaking with John's disciples, I'm going to show you something in Acts 9. But if I recall correctly in reading my notes, one of my elders talked about when he has previously heard someone speaking in tongues and there's an interpretation that followed. He says that the majority of the interpretations were telling the people to seek the Father. He summarized it like as if the Father was saying, like, I see your heart, and now seek me out, or I'm kind of putting in my own words. But he was saying that everybody does not need necessarily a tongue to do that. So this goes back to what it says in Paul's letter. And I guess I'll show you some of this because I'm just, let's go to 12. Go to the bottom of chapter 12 in Corinthians. He says there are many members of the body, right? He goes through this. He says, are all emissaries, are all prophets, are all teachers, are all workers of miracles? Do all have gift of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? So just in his writing, you can see right here, he's telling you like everybody don't have the same gifts in the body, right? And tongues is one of those that he listed up. These are like rhetorical questions. He's like, do everybody have the gift of healing? He obviously no, everybody don't have that gift. Do everybody speak with tongues? No. Does everybody interpret? No. So he's going down this list here. Um, if you go to Acts 9, which I go back over here to Acts 9, and you see Paul's conversion experience. Because I'm gonna show you another experience in the text as well. Acts 9, and you slide on down to Paul's West Coast in the building, and you come down to Paul's conversion experience. Paul's conversion experience is in verse 17-ish. All right, here we go. Well, it's before 17, but remember, so this man came, remember, Canania answered, Master, I have heard about this man. He was talking about Paul. How many evils he did to your set apart ones in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priest to bind all those calling on your name. But the master said to him, go, for he is a chosen vessel of mine to bear my name before nations, kings, and the children of Israel. For I shall show him how much he has to suffer for my name. And Kananya went away and went into the house and laying his hands on him. He said, Brother Shaul, the master Yahusha, who appeared to you on the way as you came, has sent me so that you might see again and be filled with the set apart Ruach. And immediately there fell from his eyes as if it were scales, and he received the sight, and rising up, he was immersed. Now, keep that in mind and slide over to, there's another, well, instead of going, I'll just say it like this. In Acts 10, so usually people will say, well, you tarry for the Holy Spirit, right? And remember I told you, is genuine tongues evidence that a person has the Holy Spirit? Yes, right? But is that the only gift or evidence that a person has the Holy Spirit? No, because everybody don't speak in tongues. It said that in Paul's letter, right? So the gifts are given as they are needed. Why would you need another tongue if that's not your mission or your position in the body? A tongue being a language. Also, that I believe that tongues is also a prayer language based on what you see in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 2 and verse 4, right? It's a language between a man and Elohim. It's private. I think it's a private prayer language, nothing to be done for show at all. Paul just told us in 1 Corinthians, he said, if it ain't no interpreter, be quiet. So this is not something that's uncontrollable, like you out of control or chaotic. It's in order. And he was like, if there ain't no interpreter in the assembly, then you be quiet. He said, let him be quiet. Right? So this person has control, if you understand what that's saying, over what they're doing. And so I just wanted to bring a few things out about tongues. But let's keep going. I was going to show you, well, Acts 10, right? Because I'll show you this real quick. Acts 10, and then we'll go on to the next thing. Acts 10 says this. Remember when Paul at Kepha went to talk to Cornelius and the people that was with Cornelius, right? Now remember, it says what happened after he got through when he was speaking. When he first came to see Cornelius, Cornelius bowed to him, right? Peter told him, get up. I'm a man. Get up, right? And he went in the house and he found many who had come together, right? And so he tells him, like, man, I'm a Yahudi. I'm really not allowed to associate with, you or another race, pretty much. But Elohim has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean, right? So now he said, that's why I came without hesitation when I was sent for. So he says, why have you sent for me? And so then Cornelius tells him what's going on. Now look at what Kepha says. Truly I see that Elohim shows no partiality, but in every nation, he who fears him, Elohim, and works righteousness is accepted by him. He sent the word to the children of Israel, bringing the good news, peace through Yahusha HaMashiach, he is master of all. And so he goes on down, and I want you to see what happens on the last part of this. At the end of this chapter, he says, and here it is, verse 45. And those of the circumcision who believed were astonished, as many as came with Kepha, because the gift of the set apart Ruach had been poured out on the nations also. For they were hearing them speaking with tongues and extolling Elohim. Then Kepha answered, is anyone able to forbid water that these should not be immersed, and who have received the set apart Ruach, even also as also we? And he commanded them to be immersed in the name of Yahusha, Messiah. They asked him to remain a few days. Now, notice the order here. They received the Ruach before they was immersed. Did anybody else catch that? And notice that when they spoke with tongues, like it just goes back to something my elder said. Basically, he says when he heard an interpreter, the times he's heard it, where there was an interpreter, it was like it was a, some type of acknowledgement of the people's hearts, and then there was like a direction or an instruction for the people to seek the Creator, right? To seek Him, uh, go after Him, to really dive in with Him, basically. And you see right here in verse 46, they were what? Extolling Elohim. So they were praising Elohim. What were they hearing in Acts 2? They're like, we hear every man speaking in our own language. And what was they doing in that language? Acts 2. How we hear them in our own language, and they was doing what? Verse 11. He says, we hear them speaking in our own tongues, the great deeds of Elohim. They were extolling him. They were praising him. So this is what you hear when you hear these tongues. It's all the focus and the attention is on the Father. You see what I'm saying? So one thing about it is when you see that, right? So they were extolling the Father when they were doing that. So I don't know, has anybody else ever seen that in Acts 10? That they received the Ruach before they actually um before they actually were immersed. So just a quick note there. All right, let's keep going. Let's go on to now. I can show you this in the Book of Jubilees. I think that's where I'm at now. Let's go here and go here, and then I'm not gonna hold you much longer. I'm gonna let you out here in a little moment. But whatever we don't cover today, then I'll plan to cover on Shabbat. We are meeting early on Shabbat. Just enough why it's an early meeting on Shabbat. So we just wanted to let you all know. Um, just wanted to let you all know that, FYI. Um, and that's going to be pretty early for the West Coasters. Yanata. You got to get your Z's that night, huh? I'm just messing. Uh, had to decompress. I got you. What are we talking about? Okay. All right. Well, you missed a little bit, so you probably had to just watch the recording for like the more context, but you just kind of came in on that part. Now look at Exodus. It says, and Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, who is for Yahuwah? Come to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves to him. And he said to them, thus said Yahuwah Elohim of Israel, right? Go to and fro and kill your brothers. And this, we know, we talked about this, and we talked about the book of Acts. So you notice 3,000 people were added to them at Shabuoth, and notice how many people were killed in the wilderness at what is believed to be Shabuoth, where he came down and he saw the people. There was a lot going on down there when he came down that mountain, and 3,000 men fell in the day, and look about 3,000 were added. So we see this number. This is what I wanted to show you, because you see the word for coal or voices This is in Exodus 19. Look at this mountain. Remember, I told you it's just like a volcano. So the mountain is on fire. It's like a volcano. You know, when you think of a mountain on fire, that's, think of a volcano, right? And it was, I'm sure it was a much greater scene than even that. It says it came to be on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain. And the word for voice there is coal, and the word for thunders is also coal. And the voice of a shofar was very strong, and all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet with Elohim. And they stood at the foot of the mountain, and Mount Sinai was in smoke, all of it, because Yahuwah descended upon it in fire, excuse me. And his smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and all the mountains trembled exceeding. So imagine this scene. Now look at this scene in Ezekiel. And the Spirit lifted me up, and behind me I heard the sound of a great rumbling voice. That's the word kol. Blessed be the esteem of Yahuwah from his place. And the sound, that's the word kol, of the wings of the living creatures touching one another, and the sound of the wheels beside them, and the sound of a great rushing. So both the word for voice and the word for thunders here in Exodus is kol, which can be defined as a voice or a sound. And in Ezekiel, where the words voice and sound are also kol. So also recall that there was a sound of a rushing mighty wind in the book of Acts, in Acts 2, which filled the house where the apostles were sitting when they received the Ruach HaKodesh. Now, notice the excitement in the atmosphere when the Father speaks and his Ruach moves upon men. Look at that. Look at that type of an atmosphere, the excitement in the atmosphere, right? Shabuoth is a harvest that refers to bringing everyone in, wheat and tares. The separating will be done by the messengers. Now, note that this feast allows for leaven in the bread. There will be leaven among the brethren. Yet in the fall feast, we see the process of cleansing the bride for the great wedding at the end of time. The fall feasts go back to back to back. Teruah, Atonement, Sukkot. So all sin is going to be removed. Remember, the Sukkot is the great wedding. Teruah is the warning sign, right? It's the warning. It's the alarm. It's to prepare your house. The Day of Atonement is coming 10 days later. That's the Day of Judgment. After that, if a person makes it through judgment, they can proceed to the wedding feast, Sukkot. So all sin is going to be removed. So the gleaners who are not of Israel can come in. They can be grafted in. Yet once they come in, they also must abide by the instructions of the covenant, right? So everyone has to abide by the instructions of the covenant. Everybody. One law for the native born and for the stranger, right? So uh, now this is Book of Jubilees. I'll show you this. And just a quick note, whenever you read any text, really you want to pray for understanding, whether that's in the canon or outside the canon, what we call the canon. You can it's good that you pray about discernment. Pray for discernment. Um, so okay, I'm just looking in the chat. All righty. Okay. So anybody familiar with the Book of Jubilees? Yeah, everybody, pretty much.
Okay, Moray.
Okay. Um, well, so just I'm I'll just say it like this. Basically, you want to make sure you pray for discernment whenever you read any text, period. So there's talk about a covenant made in the third month, and this is in Jubilee chapter 6. I already got it pulled up, so I'll show you this. I'll zoom in a little bit. Let's see. Hopefully if I can do this. Yeah, I can do that. Put it in. I think this is in reading mode. Wait a second. There we go. All right, so this is Jubilees. Why I do that? Now I got to go back to chapter 6. All right. So here we go. Book of Jubilees. Now, let's go to chapter 6, and I will show you something in chapter 6. All right, chapter 6 reads as such, and this is in English. Now, if you know anything about the Book of Jubilees, uh, there was not a full manuscript found in Hebrew, but there was a so the version that we have, hold on, let me check my notes. So it comes from the Ge'ez text, which is what so the Ethiopian text. Well, actually, let me just say it like this, based on what I if I recall correctly. So the text that is, I think that we have now, because there was no full Hebrew text, is actually based off a Greek text of the manuscript first, from my understanding. And that is, you can look into the Ge'ez text, right? And the Book of Jubilees is considered canonical by the Ethiopian Orthodox uh, Church, as well as Ethiopian Jews. And so you look into it and you'll see that I think that there's belief that the version that we have, the Ge'ez text, is based on an earlier Greek text. But anyway, I just want to bring that out. So you do your own research and you know you want to dive into things as the creator leads you to. It says on the new moon of the third month, he went out of the ark and built an altar on that mountain. Now, who is this? This is talking about Noah, right? And he made atonement for the earth and took a kid and made atonement by his blood for all the guilt of the earth. Everything on it had been destroyed apart from what was in the ark with Noah. And he put on its fat on the altar, and he took an ox, a he goat, and a sheep, and kids, and salt, and the turtle dove. Notice the salt right there. And the turtle dove and young pigeons, and offered them as a whole offering on the altar, and poured an offering mixed with oil on it, and sprinkled wine and scattered frankincense over everything, and made a soothing odor acceptable before Yahuwah. And Yahuwah smelt the soothing odor, and he made a covenant with him that there should never again be a flood to destroy the earth, that while the earth lasts, seed time and harvest should never cease, and that cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night should not change their order or ever cease. And he said to Noah, "Be fruitful and multiply on the earth, increase in number on it, and be a blessing in it. I will inspire the fear and dread of you in everything on the earth and in the sea. And behold, I give for you for food all the wild animals and birds, and everything that moves on the earth, and the fish in the waters, that is, all things, as I once gave you the green plants. So now I give you all things to eat, but you must not eat flesh with its life still in it, that is the blood." All right, so we see that part here, and we'll continue on from here. Now, you see little notes in here, footnotes, citations where you can read different. You can read also what it says from the translation. Like they'll show you some things if you read the little footnotes. For the life of every creature is in its blood, lest your own blood be required. So it says, don't eat blood, right? From every man, from every animal, I will require the blood of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of Elohim he made man. And do you be fruitful and multiply on the earth. And Noah and his son swore that he would not eat any blood and any flesh. And in this month he made a covenant before Yahuwah Elohim for every generation of the earth. It was for this reason that in this month he told you to make a covenant with the sons of Israel on the mountain with an oath. What month is this? It's talking about the third month. Right now we are in the third month, right? Hebraically, we're in the third month. And he says, and to sprinkle blood on them to ratify the terms of this covenant, which Yahuwah made with them forever. Now, where did Moses sprinkle the blood on them at? That was at Mount Sinai, right? So this is what he's highlighting, what he's citing here. He's citing Mount Sinai. Just letting you know. Hallelujah. Yahuwah. All right. So we see the connection going on here. And what I can also do, I think I sent y'all a copy of this as well. So you can also look at this in the links that I've sent you in the emails. If you look at the bottom of those emails, there's a link to this version of the Apocryphal Old Testament. It's known as the Sparks Old Testament, right? And so you'll look at this and it'll highlight. You can click on these, keep these books for yourself. And so I'll highlight this part right here, and then we'll probably stop for the night, right shortly after this. But it's telling you, it says this provision is written there for you to observe continually, namely that you should never eat any blood of wild animals or birds or cattle as long as the earth lasts, and anyone who does eat the blood of wild animals or cattle or birds at any time, he and his offspring shall be uprooted from the land. Command the sons of Israel never to eat any blood at all. Notice how much emphasis is put on this, y'all. So that their names and their descendants may be before Yahuwah our Elohim continually. And for this law there is no time limit, for it is forever. They shall observe it in every generation, so that regularly every day may make atonement on their behalf with blood before the altar. In the morning and in the evening, they shall seek forgiveness on their behalf perpetually before Yahuwah, that they may keep it and not be rooted up. So the Feast of Weeks comes in right here, where he says that he gave Noah and his sons a sign that there should never again be a flood on the earth. He set his bow in the cloud as a sign of the eternal covenant that there should never again be a flood on the earth to destroy it. That is why it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month, which is the third month, once a year, so as to renew the covenant each year. And this whole festival was always celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till Noah's days, for 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and a week of years, till the day of Noah's death. But after Noah's death, his sons became corrupt and ate blood till the days of Abraham. Yet Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it. Feast of Weeks, this is what it's talking about. Till your days. But in your days, the sons of Israel forgot it till I restored it to them at this mountain. Command the sons of Israel then to observe this festival in every generation as a commandment binding on them, as a commandment binding on them on one day in the year. In this month they shall celebrate the festival. It is the festival of weeks and the feast of first fruits. A twofold and a double festival. So notice it is a first fruits because it's a harvest, right? And the feast of weeks. So you see, first fruits, Shabuoth rather, is also a type of first fruits. All praise to the Most High. So I want you to take a look at this when you get a chance. In your own time, you can rather at your own interest rather. And notice that about this feast, he says, "For I have written in the book of the first law, which I have written for you, that you should celebrate it at its proper time on one day in the year. And I have explained to you the details of his sacrifice so that the sons of Israel may remember it and celebrate it in every generation. In this month, on one day in every year." It's talking about the third month. He's talking about the feast of Shabuoth, which is also a type of a first fruits as well. It's known as, it says, a twofold and a double feast, double festival. He says, "Celebrate it then as you have been instructed." All praise to the Most High. We'll stop right there. As far as that book is concerned, let me stop share and then I will close this out as well. And I want to make sure, let me make sure that's the place I want to stop at for today, which might be a good place for us to stop. Let me see where I'm at in the presentation. Um, is this too much? Are we good?
I'm good, Moray. I can't speak for everyone.
I know it's kind of late, so what I'll do is I'll probably stop right there, and we'll pick up on my slides at a new place. And I'm looking at my stop point right here, so I can start right here at this point. So that's cool. And what I want you to understand is, so for your homework, if you all can read the book of Ruth, chapter 2, I want you to understand what a kinsman redeemer is. Understand what that is from a Hebraic standpoint. What is a kinsman redeemer? What is the context of a kinsman redeemer? What is his purpose? What does he do, right? And why is he called a kinsman redeemer, right? Why is he called a redeemer? So, but any questions right now? I'll pause right there for a moment. And actually, with that, I'll say shalom to those that may be watching this later on YouTube, I'll pause right there. Actually, I'll keep the recording going until we finish the questions. So first, I want to see if there are any questions or any comments in regard to Shabuoth. I know this is new to some people. Everybody's not hasn't celebrated Shabuoth before, so feel free to ask questions. Yeah, Nata, go ahead.
Um, Shalom everyone. Shalom Will. Hi.
Shalom, I ain't
Um,
seen you in a minute. I'm just playing. I'm
oh,
just joking.
no. I'm sorry, so you said read Ruth to understand more of a kinsman redeemer. Ruth, what chapter? I missed that. Sorry.
Chapter 2. Read chapter 2.
Two.
Yes, ma'am.
Hold up. Hold up.
Read chapter 2 and let me see here. Yeah, chapter 2 is cool. Yeah, that's cool. I got a synopsis slide too that I'll show on Shabbat with a lot of the symbolism in there in the meetings, I think. So yeah. But chapter 2 of Ruth, because I plan on discussing that. It's gonna be early on Shabbat, but um just wanted to bring it out, just prepare everybody. If you don't make it, then we'll have the recording as well. Um so some quick questions. What do the two loaves represent in Shavuot? Why two loaves? Why not one? We talked about this before, right? What do the two loaves represent? Why are there two loaves? Why is it not just one loaf of bread? What do they represent? Well, remember they represent the two houses of Israel, right? Because
Mm.
Israel was split, right? It's divided, but the two houses are going to become one again. Remember the prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, right? Also, why with leaven this time? Why? Why are we baking with leaven, but the other feast that had no leaven? Why is there leaven here? What does that leaven represent? Or what could it represent?
Sin.
Well, so basically it could represent, or it might represent what you would call the strangers and the foreigners, meaning there will be others that are able to come into the two houses and um but they may not be keeping Torah perfectly. They may not know Torah or understand Torah, but they have a desire to be attached to the Elohim of Israel, right? So they come in, there's going to be obviously a sifting and a training, if you will, or a teaching, if you will, and then people can make they can make their own choices, informed choices at that point, whether to serve or not. So the heart will be revealed in that regard as well. Um, but that leaven in essence represents the way I've heard it taught is strangers and foreigners and also Israelites that are not necessarily walking in Torah perfectly, or might not even be keeping Torah at all. And then there's going to be like a sifting, right? So remember, but these people, in essence, they may have a desire to serve and know the Creator, but they also have to be taught how to be in relationship with the Creator. Um, because remember, nobody can enter into the kingdom. There can be no uncleanness or falsehood in the kingdom. So it can't even get through the gates. And if you look at Revelation 21 verse 27, no falsehood. So I just wanted to highlight a few things, but I got this on a slide for you as well. What the two loaves represent. They represent the two houses of Israel, and also how the leaven could be likened to strangers and foreigners. Because remember, in this feast, you are also commanded when you do this harvest, don't go back and glean or pick up the sheaves that you drop. Leave them for the stranger who is attaching himself. This ain't just talking about a random stranger, by the way. It's talking about somebody has a willingness to serve the Creator, but also is in the position of a stranger, and they have to also cleave to the God of Israel, right? And they have to learn how to be in covenant with the God of Israel, just like Israelites do that are going to be gathered too from these other four corners, but they don't know Elohim. But they're going to have to be taught Elohim. We see something similar like this when we see in the New Testament where uh, Kepha and Paul and they're going out to these other places, to these other Israelites that are living in other places, and they're giving them this besora, this good news, right? about the Messiah that was prophesied. He has come, and how we're supposed to be. We have a way back to our rightful place with the Father through Him, right? We are Israel. These people that were there, they knew they were Israelites, but their culture, you can understand, you can perceive that they knew they were Israelites. A lot of them, obviously, or rather, and then, but they had lost their culture. They didn't have an understanding of their, how to be an Israelite, right? In the sense of walking with the Creator. So this means they had to be taught, just like we have Israel today that has to be taught, right? And me personally, I feel like we have many lakes and ponds and streams and rivers out there we can fish in for our brothers and our sisters, but it has to be led by the Father as well. It can't be done in our own strength. It has to be led by Him because the timing has to be right. And the message has to be right. And the messenger has to be right, right? So all praise to the Creator. All right. I think we're good to go for tonight. Um, Everybody good? Any how's the week been going? Pretty hopefully good. I know Kakma and Inglaterra, I know it's late for y'all. So y'all probably under the covers right now.
I'm a night owl.
No worries. Just a quick touch base. We'll pick up from where I stopped on Shabbat, probably around that area, and then we'll just keep going I'll try to get it all done before the feast actually occurs the on Yom Rishon. So all praise to the Most High. With that, Mishpachah, I will say Shabbat Shalom. I love you all. And I mean, not Shabbat Shalom, but Shalom. I love you all, and y'all know how to reach me. Let me pray us out. Father Yahuwah, Abba, we thank you for allowing us to come together and use this technology in a righteous way this evening and this night. We pray, Father, that you will continue to keep us as your own and lead us in the way that is everlasting and give us your perspective and your understanding of your word and your ways. Help us to win, Father, and be the people you've called us to be. In Hamashiach, Yahushua's name we pray. Let it be so according to your will. Hallelujah, Yahuwah. Hallelujah, Yahuwah. Hallelujah, Yahuwah. All praise to
Hallelujah.
the Most High.
Hallelujah. Yahuwah.
Hallelujah. Wow.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom. Love y'all, Miss Fakai.
Shalom,
Take care.
everyone. Leila Tov.
Shalom, Layla
Later,
Tov,
Toad.
Yanatai,
So, yeah, I
Bye.
mean, Leila Tov, Daniel.
Layla Tov.